Okay, brilliant.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm sorry for this technical issues, right? So as you see, the title of my presentation is The End of Life Colors and the Meanings of Life, Death, and Old Age. So actually, I've written a paper, so it's going to be mainly a paper presentation of my article, and in case you're interested, I can send to you the link to the article. So in this paper, what I did is employ cultural and literary gerontology as the main framework to address the issue of aging and caring of the oldest all, as is represented in contemporary American writer Erica Jong's later work. I don't know how familiar you are with Erica Jong. For those who are not very much familiar, she's one of the most important, let's say, icons of the feminist movement of the 60s and 70s. And she's also very famous of her groundbreaking novel. It was called Fear of Lying, published in 1973. So perhaps some of them it rings a bell. So in her early works, Jong openly discussed intimate experiences and professional aspirations of young women. And at the same time, in her writing, she illustrated the social, cultural, and political climate of the 70s in the US, which, as we know, was mainly characterized by sexual revolution, social healers, and also the second wave women's liberation movement. However, the issues regarding older women, dementia, old age, the end-of-life narrative have not been addressed in the feminist agenda of this period. So this is exactly what Jong does when she starts to grow older. By incorporating the voices of the female representatives of the baby boom generation, she examines the ways they approach the latest stages in life and explore the often silenced aspects of parental caregiving. So in this paper, in this presentation, I will focus on Jong's latest novel to date that is called Fear of Dying, and it was published in 2015. And I've chosen this particular novel because it deserves a special attention, because in contrast to her previous writings, it is primarily about aging, about death, and about losses. I also try to show that today Jong's writings continue to be as significant as they were during the feminist movement, just that she is now dealing with different topics. So in Fear of Dying, in her novel, she depicts a 60-year-old lady whose name is Vanessa, and she's faced with caregiving duties of her dying parents. She's also struggled with her husband's impotence and also the fear of her own aging, the loss of youthful looks, of rationality, and after all, mortality. So with her honesty and her witty humor, Jong brings her readers closer to age-related challenges and questions the meanings of life, death, and growing older in contemporary society. Although in the novel, old age is accompanied by pain, by dependency, by bodily decay, and ultimately by deaths, Jong also discovers that Jong, and also mainly her protagonist, Vanessa, discovers that this perplexing experience of aging and care work, as well as the proximity of death, can actually yield remarkable insights about later life stages. Jong's novel also examines, as we will see, as I will try to present here, parental narratives that elicit different subjectivities and give voice to the often silent social and psychological realities of human aging. It also tackles the problem of conveying the meaning of personhood in old age when faced with gradual mental decline, which, as we know, is especially difficult and hard to capture and to represent. So in this paper, I aim to demonstrate also how humanities-based approach and inquiry can help illuminate important aspects of the fourth age and caregiving experiences that are both challenging and revealing, but very often underrepresented and hidden under the dark shadow of dementia and the so-called deep old age. As you know, there is a substantial body of theory of the so-called third age that is closely related to retirement age of the now aging baby boomers. However, the later stages in life, also known as the fourth age, has not been the object of so much attention and has even been considered a black hole in gerontology and aging studies. This phase in life is usually marked by numerous emotional and bodily illnesses, dementia, and deaths, and is very much, of course, linked to dependency and the loss of mobility and cognitive capacities. Although care, obviously, is especially needed in the first years of life, as well as in case of illnesses, it becomes much more pronounced when older people, which are often infantilized and perceived as a homogeneous group, start to require daily assistance and support. Those living with dementia especially are assumed to lack meaningful participation and interaction, and are often regarded as the major sources of burden to family members, to family carers, and also the whole healthcare system. Although the fourth age is seen through rather negative lens, Jung's novel shows that it can offer us significant discoveries about growing older, about subjectivity and human interaction in later stages of life. So this humanities-based approach to care-related stories and end-of-life narrative also serves as a powerful tool to give meaning to old age, and helps also to provide us with significant insights about aging experiences and care relationships. So at the same time, in this paper, I tried to contribute to this growing interest in parental care narratives and illuminate this black hole in aging studies. So Erika Jong highlights in her work both anxieties and significant discoveries about the oldest old, and calls for a thinking of the fourth age and the moral imperative of care. Actually, Jung also does not shy away from explicitly describing care-related challenges and exposes her readers to the often hidden aspects of the fourth age and the so-called negativities of aging bodies. Apart from that, she also examines the complexities of Alzheimer's disease. As you know, Alzheimer's disease and related dementias are chronic illnesses that increase with age and also affect a person's capacity to manage one's life and make meaningful decisions. However, Alzheimer's is not only about rendering older individuals forgetful or dependent. Rather than that, it also represents a forgetfulness that causes people to lose their sense of who they are, and it gradually lessens people's social interaction and participation. Therefore, the possibility of developing Alzheimer's is very often regarded as one of the most fearful aspects, because it represents the loss of one's cognitive capacities, selfhood, power, social status, and also attractiveness. The challenges related to dementia are also present in Jung's later work, especially this novel. The writer expresses the protagonist, Vanessa's worries and difficulties when caring for her aging mother who lives with Alzheimer's disease. The fictional character observes how her mother's progressive cognitive impairment impacts her mood, her communication, and also her relationship with her and the outside world. Vanessa confesses that many times she prayed for her mother to die sooner because she no longer could stand the sight of her mother's loss of rationality and her silent suffering in a smelling room. And this is what Vanessa says. The many times I prayed for her to die, she was so frail and so sad that I often couldn't bear to visit her. I always preferred to be with my daughter and grandson rather than with her. The protagonist even thinks that the pain of her dying should not be prolonged because, according to her, lingering may be much worse than dying. However, even if faced with caregiving struggles and coping with dementia, Vanessa, as the narrative unfolds, learns new ways of interacting with her aging mother. The daughter realizes that language is not the only means to connect with the external world. Although protagonist confesses that sometimes she was not alert enough to her new ways of communication, her mother has taught her that senses, colors, tastes, smells, sounds, and the body language per se can be as powerful and efficient as the spoken language. And I quote from the novel. We are so unaware of different languages, not Latin or Greek, but the language of color, the language of food. We hardly know all the different kinds of human music. My mother could speak without speaking, laugh without laughing, sing without having voice. The parents of special needs kids know this, and so the children of the dying. Through her body language, her mother tries to show her approval of Vanessa's clothing, which reminds her of her younger days and makes her happy, even if she, of course, cannot verbalize her emotions. And this is another quotation from the novel. She, the mother, sits up and tries to exclaim at the color of my shirt, red and purple with mossy green. Her taste in colors was always over the top, ahead of her time, widely artistic, but she can't speak. She exclaims without exclaiming. I know she's approving of my colorful colors. She has found a new sort of speech that is wordless. So the power of nonverbal communication is getting more attention in the field of aging studies, especially in dementia-related research and person-centered care, which significantly contributes to improving quality of life and cognitive function of older people and also their carers. Creativity and art-based activities, when possible, such as, for example, painting, music, drama, and dance, can improve the physical, emotional, and neurological well-being of people living with dementia and also provide them new ways of social interaction and emotional support. Such non-pharmacological interventions allow for alternative ways of communication and the creative expressive power, which help reveal novel opportunities to express people's thoughts, emotions, and also capabilities. Additionally, research shows that different forms of interaction challenge the notion of the loss of agency, as older people with dementia show that the body itself has this power of creating and attentional capacities, and also the power of natural expression, as it was demonstrated also in Vanessa Mother's depiction. Even faced with dementia and the lack of coherent and rational engagement, diverse forms of personhood and sense-making still remain. So although darkened by dementia and reduced capacities, people still preserve a personhood and autonomy until the end of their existence. So in her later work, especially in this novel Fear of Dying, Young actually brings to light these important discoveries and shows how experiences of parental care can offer new visions about dementia and subjectivity that are disclosed through the body language and emotional intimacy. Both Young and her protagonist, Vanessa, realize that personhood actually goes beyond speech and rationality, as it manifests through alternative ways of interaction with the outside world. The author also demonstrates that to notice and to appreciate these little glimpses of life and the assertion of agency requires patience and love. So by depicting challenging but also illuminating aspects of parental care and aging realities, Young also stresses the need for more innovative, humanities-based approaches to person-centered care and also dementia research in order to produce new language and at the same time improve the quality of older people and those who take care of her. So finally, by focusing on Young's later work, especially her latest novel to date, Fear of Dying, I try to address these complexities of parental care that are shadowed by dementia in the deep old age. I also try to show how literature can illuminate alternative ways of representing later years and caregiving experiences that are marked by new perceptions of aging and the discovery of the power of nonverbal communication. In her work, Young exposes these usually silenced and avoided aspects of care, such as so-called dirty work or the negativities of the body and the bodily decay, even if they represent the fear of growing older and go against these ideals of successful or active and healthy aging that we have in our society that mainly emphasize youth, beauty, self-management, empowerment. The writer also seems to offer different perspectives about aging in the hope kind of to unite her readers in this act of mutual support and solidarity. And her work also shows that taking care of old parents is an act of gratitude and love, that and only through compassion and resilience can we learn to better understand and appreciate this process, this complex process of growing older and also all life stages. And also wanted to show how care narratives can give voice to those aging individuals who struggle to communicate and are silenced in nursing homes, which, as age scholars Gillard and Hicks say, represent the society's greatest fears of old age. So they say that instead of escaping from these uncomfortable truths and realities of the fourth age, we should open out the debate because of its relevance and importance today, even if, or most likely because, its resolution is so hard to realize. So taking care-related narratives into account would strengthen collective solidarity and help manage the increasing anger towards the aging population, which, as we know, has become especially pronounced during the recent COVID pandemic. If before this crisis, older people living with dementia were already at high risk of negative health outcomes and exclusion, the COVID outbreak has acted kind of like a magnifying glass that has exposed increasing ageism and the fear of old age. However, as some scholars say, this global tragedy not only uncovered a story of failed humanity that needs to change, but has also showed that older people, even when they are made invisible, can actually teach us what it means to be human and how to show kindness, love, and care, even when everything seems to break in pieces around us. So thank you very much for your attention. I cannot hear you. Okay, thank you.
Hello. Hi, Ieva. My name is Miss
Hello,
Dan.
Mr.
Hi, I'm sharing the session.
Okay.
So I'm just looking for people to put their questions in our Q&A if they have any at the end of your wonderful talk. Thank you so much, Ieva. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's so much of what you're sharing that I resonate with. So I really appreciate your work and what you're offering us today. Thank you. So I'm having a look, and at the moment, I don't see any questions. So if I'm just going to say out loud to everyone that's here now, if you have questions, there's a chat box, but there's also next to that, it says people and then Q&A. If you want to just type your question into Q&A, that would be really great. And I'll also check the chat box in case you can't find it. And yeah, so I'm just looking for that now. See if anybody comes up.
Yeah, there's someone who wants a link to my paper. Definitely, I will send the link, no problem. In Q&A. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks for your interest too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there was a comment. I'll just read that even from someone saying that they looked after their mom for 3 years who had dementia, and they felt it was a blessing, very hard but also joyous, and that there's incredible creativity around dementia and mental decline happening as well. So they want
exactly. Yeah.
Definitely, your work has definitely touched some people today, I think.
Well, actually, myself, I'll also take care of my grandmother who has dementia. She is 92, turning 93 now. So it's also what I was explaining is also like interesting to see how the things that you actually kind of, research are also reflected in your everyday life. So it's also very much related to this comment in the chat. So yeah, it's very hard. It's very difficult, but at the same time, it's very illuminating. You can learn a lot of things that you've never thought about, how the human brain works. And, one day is one thing, another day the same person seems to be a completely different person. So, right, it's really challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please, Kelly, it's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ieva, for your talk. It's really fascinating to hear this kind of mix between literature and art and dementia, and it's also something that is really interesting to me. I didn't have a question per se, but I was wondering if you had come across the book by Jared Stark called A Death of One's Own. Okay.
I'll check it. Death of One's Own. Okay.
Yeah. It's a wonderful book where he mixes literature, metaphors, and the end of life, just to kind of find a new language to talk about these, as you say, the dark hole of aging research. So it might be interesting for you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I will check it out. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks, Kelly. Thanks for that. And also, just in Q&A, someone is asking for a link to your paper, Ieva. So
I've just sent it in the chat. Is it okay? Because I don't know how to send it in Q&A.
Okay.
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yeah. Okay. Just so that everyone can see that. That's great. Perfect. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And we just have a few more minutes, so I'll hang on a little bit if that's okay. But one thing that came up for me as you were speaking was thinking about how humor can be a part of this too, because, you know, as you're shaking your head, it just comes, doesn't it, sometimes with the things that happen when we are trying to find our way, I think, in a place where we haven't been before, in terms of our aging and our dying. So I think that's a very tender place, but also it can have such a humor about it, which is so humbling as well. So that's...
Yeah, well, sometimes we just use humor, right, as a coping strategy, but actually because that's one of the ways to deal with life challenges. And this is what also Young does in her work. She uses wit and humor, which is actually the way of writing. But yeah, very much related to what you missed to say. It's a coping strategy sometimes, the best one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the things that come from that are just, well, we couldn't imagine it any other way, I don't think. So that's lovely too. Yes, Jessie.
Can I ask, I'm really sorry, I had trouble getting in, Ieva, so I missed most of your talk. I'm really sorry and sad about that. But can you hear me?
Yes, definitely. Perfect. I'll actually share the link to my article in case you might be interested, because the talk was very much based on the article. Yeah.
Brilliant. Just in this moment then, I was wondering about the relationship between the aging and dying person and the practice of writing. I wondered if you had anything to say about that.
Well, actually, what I looked at is not like a personal writing, but I looked at the novel, at the fictional work of Erica Jong, but her works are so autobiographical, like what she experiences in her everyday life. She kind of writes about it in a fictional way. And also, in this book particularly, she written about the struggles of parental care of her oldest old. Her parents died when we were like almost 100 or something like that. And also in her more like personal writing, she talks about it very much. It's like, well, people congratulate me saying, oh, you're so lucky to have old parents. And well, you have no idea what you're talking about, you know, what it implies. But of course, in this book, she, as Mr. was saying, she kind of uses this humor and wit, trying to explore these complexities of growing older, of the dirty work, of the negativities of the body, you know, all the things that imply, and those things that actually, as I said, are so unrepresented because we don't want to talk about it, because it's a very kind of still a taboo topic. It's very unpleasant because you know that it's the end of life narrative. It's not going to go better. So it's really difficult to talk about these aspects. And yeah, I don't know if I kind of answered your question.
Yeah, no, I will definitely read your paper. That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great.
Thank you, Jessie, for your interest.
Okay, let me see. So I have a question here, Ieva, from Aubrey. And she's saying, do you think improving dementia care and valuing a person in this state can live alongside a person's right to die, to include a person who wants to hasten death to avoid severe dementia?
Where's the question?
It's in our Q&A. At the
Q&A?
Yeah, if you just click on Q&A, you should
see. Yeah. I don't know if I have an answer to this question. I think this is very personal, right? Yeah, there's so much research now on dementia-related care, and there are so different approaches now about dementia. Like actually, there's a lot of research on that, on the fourth age and how to deal with it. But actually, some people say, well, this is actually, I don't know if there is kind of a treatment for dementia, because actually all the things that we came up with now and all these treatments actually do not seem to work. And some people even say, well, we should not pour so much money into care-related dementia and research because actually it's a natural process of growing older. So I don't know, there are different debates around this issue, and I think it's really complex and difficult to deal with.
Thank you, Ieva.
But definitely improving dementia care, it would help not only the carers, but also not only people who are living with dementia, but also people who work with them, because it's tough work. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Ieva. Thank you so much for your wonderful talk about your paper and all these really important points about aging and dying that often we don't include in our open conversations in daily life. So it's super important, and I'm really happy you're here today. And remember, everyone, Ieva's put her link to her paper where you can access it to read it in again or in your own time. It's in the main chat page here. So I think that's all the time we have for today, Ieva. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, a lot of people are saying thank you, so I can see it coming through. So we're moving on to now Callie Carrigan, and I can see you're there, Callie. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. And Callie, you're going to be speaking about psychedelics for existential distress at the end of life, yeah?
That's right.
Okay. And just to say, I didn't get a chance to say at the beginning last time, but so to remind everyone that you can go to the Q&A section and ask your questions if they come up as Callie's speaking. And you can also pin the speaker if you want them big on your screen. So there's 3 dots in the corner of your picture there that you could use for them to pin the speaker. And and we're going to take a few minutes before the end of this Callie session to take some of your questions as well, which will be about 10:25. Okay, 25 past the hour. Okay, Callie, the stage is all yours. Thank you so much.
Great, so I'll just share my screen. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, so can you see that? Mm-hmm. And you can all hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Callie Carrigan. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Amsterdam. My PhD concerns stories, particularly the end-of-life biographies of persons wishing to hasten death by assisted suicide. I have a background in psychology and in palliative care, and have for many years had a fascination with psychedelics, particularly their potential to help us navigate the end of life. So I live in France, and I'm the founder of the Lyon Psychedelic Society, as well as an administrator of the French Psychedelic Society, both of which work to spread scientific information about psychedelics and improve harm reduction with these substances in the community. So today I will take you through some of the little-known history of the use of psychedelics for confronting death and dying, and the recent resurgence in interest in these substances as alternatives to current pharmacological interventions for the treatment of end-of-life distress. So I can think of no better way to begin this presentation than with stories. So this is Thomas Hartel. He's a stage 4 cancer patient who in 2020 was the first person to receive an exemption from the Canadian government to use psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, to treat his end-of-life anxiety. So I'll let Thomas speak for himself.
The fear of the unknown is one aspect of the whole dying process. Less troublesome for me than not being there when I'm needed. Because the cancer is already spread into the intestines and my lymph nodes and peritoneal tissues, you're automatically stage 4. All they can offer you is palliative care. In the course of looking up research on mushrooms and cancer, you come across the Johns Hopkins studies. So I looked into that a little bit more, and they were talking about people who had, stage 4 cancer, just like me, and they were looking at cure rates of 80%. So people, the exact same problems that I have, 80% were coming out of this with a spiritually meaningful solution to their anxiety and depression. How could I possibly ignore 80%? How could anybody ignore 80%? And in my investigations, I came across Therasil, very experienced and knowledgeable people who were able to tell me a lot of the things that I had no idea about psilocybin. I knew it was psychedelic, and I knew that it was something that, I'd learned my whole life was this evil thing. And then you find out that it can actually help people who have addictions problems. It can help people who have anxiety and depression, and they've been testing it, with all kinds of traumatic things like that. We make the application to the health minister, and you get an automatic reply back just to let you know they received it, and then the wait starts. I'll be putting on a blindfold to block out distractions, and some headphones with some music while we wait for the onset of that. What happens after that, I have no idea. I'm nervous, but I'm still looking forward to it. Very much.
Okay, so what Thomas is doing may seem quite extraordinary to many of you, but it actually has a long history. To begin that history, I would first start by asking the question, well, what are psychedelics? So the term psychedelics was coined in 1957 by Humphrey Osmond in a letter written to Aldous Huxley. It is derived from the Greek for psyche, meaning soul or mind, and delos, meaning manifest. In other words, they are substances which make the mind or soul manifest, referring to their ability to bring hidden parts of the psyche into consciousness. Psychedelics are a class of hallucinogenic drugs whose primary effect is to trigger non-ordinary states of consciousness and elicit mystical type experiences. And they can be divided into 3 large families of chemical compounds: tryptamines, phenethylamines, and lysergamides. These chemicals all bind to the serotonin 5-H2A receptor, which act on key circuits in the brain involved with sensory perception, memory, and cognition. Notable psychedelics include psilocybin, a tryptamine found in several species of mushroom, more commonly known as magic mushrooms, mescaline, found in several species of cacti, LSD, a synthetic compound isolated from the ergo fungus, and DMT, present in several plant species, and sometimes mixed with other plants to create the ceremonial brew ayahuasca. Sorry. So since the late 19th century, mescaline has been used by Native Americans in religious and ceremonial rituals, and has been known in scientific circles for its ability to induce hallucinations and mystical type experiences. The strange and enigmatic effect reported by persons who had ingested the cactus would attract the attention of British writer Aldous Huxley, who, during one of his trips to California, asked psychiatrist Humphrey Osmond to supervise an experience with this drug.
Callie,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but at the moment, I'm not sure if you are meaning to share your PowerPoint.
Yeah, I am, yeah.
We can't see your PowerPoint at the moment.
Oh, you can't see it. Okay.
No.
Oh. Okay, let's see if
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's happening. I'm really sorry to interrupt. Ieva, are you? So you can. I can see that you are sharing your screen.
Yeah.
But we can only see
Okay.
We can only see
So maybe I'll
us. We could see. Yeah.
I'll try sharing it again. Let's see if
Yes, that's a good idea. I'm really sorry, and I actually got the link for the video, and I'm just going to pop it in the chat as well. So if people want to watch it again, that at their own pace. But I was unsure of what was happening, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. I'll
so
try
if you want
again,
to try again,
yeah. So let's see. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see it now. Yes.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Great. Super.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yes. So yeah, sorry. So Huxley's encounter with mescaline would be the inspiration for his book, The Doors of Perception, published in 1953, in which he would conclude that the urge to transcend oneself is universal through times and cultures. Almost 10 years later, in his last book, Island, he would once again pick up the subject, but this time his focus would be on the possibility of using hallucinogens to enhance consciousness. He imagines a utopian society of individuals living on an island he calls Pala, and using a fictional drug called moksha at key moments of life, particularly at the end, to aid existential transitions and alleviate the fear of death. Huxley's intuition of using psychedelic substances to facilitate the process of dying came at a time following the Second World War, when medicalization and technology were beginning to take over all aspects of life, and death was increasingly regarded as a failure of medicine and placed behind closed doors. So the onslaught of technology and science and their dehumanizing effects on individuals would be a topic that Huxley would strongly reject and would write at length in many of his books. So Huxley, being, as always, ahead of his time, would be the first to experiment with this new kind of dying as psychedelic-assisted death, similarly to what he had imagined in Island. As he lay at home surrounded by his family after a long battle with larynx cancer, Huxley died on the 22nd of November, 1963, in the midst of an LSD trip. Laura, his wife, who accompanied him in his last hours, wrote the following letter to Julian Huxley, Aldous' brother, following his death. Then I don't know exactly what time it was. He asked for his tablet and wrote, "Try LSD 100 intramuscular." Although, as you can see from this photostatic copy, it is not very clear. I know this is what he meant. I asked him to confirm it. I knew what was to be done. I went quickly into the cupboard in the other room where Dr. Bernstein was, and the TV which had just announced the shooting of Kennedy. I took the LSD and said, "I am going to give him a shot of LSD. He asked for it." The doctor had a moment of agitation because you know very well the uneasiness about this drug in the medical mind. Then he said, "All right, at this point, what's the difference?" Easy, easy. And you are doing this willingly and consciously and beautifully, going forward and up, light and free, forward and up towards the light, into complete love. The twitching stopped, the breathing became slower and slower, and there was just absolutely not the slightest indication of contraction, of struggle. It was just that the breathing became slower and slower and slower, and at 5:20 the breathing stopped. These five people all said that this was the most serene, the most beautiful death. Both doctors and nurse said they had never seen a person in similar physical condition going off so completely without pain and without struggle. So following the isolation in 1952 by Albert Hofmann, interest in the therapeutic potential of LSD had spread to several parts of the world and gathered much research interest in scientific circles throughout the 1950s and early 1960s, particularly in psychiatry, where it was widely used for its potential to act as a psychotomimetic, In other words, a substance capable of inducing psychotic states, such as those observed in schizophrenics, and thought to be a key to understanding the psychotic mind. One psychologist and medical doctor at the Chicago Medical School, Eric Cast, would break this mold, being the first to suggest a possible application of LSD for the relief of the pain of dying. His theory was that pain involved both a physical, sensory, and an emotional dimension. Having read about LSD's ability to dissociate mind and body and allow patients to enter into new states of consciousness, Cast wondered whether LSD could induce a removal of the self from emotional problems, allowing the subject to distance himself from the painful parts of his body while maintaining a sense of bodily integrity. In 1963, the same year as Huxley's death, Cast, in collaboration with Vincent Collins, set out to find out whether LSD could act as what he called the ideal analgesic agent for patients suffering with terminal illness, which would give them relief from pain, offer no impairment of the senses, have few side effects, and allow them to maintain an interest in life. To do this, he administered LSD and two commonly used narcotics at the time, Demerol and Dialudid, to gravely ill patients suffering from chronic pain. So the results of their study were pretty promising, although not entirely convincing. LSD seemed to produce significant pain relief, which lasted longer than other analgesics. The authors reported, however, that the LSD experience required a great deal of psychic energy and was hard work for the patient. And that in spite of complete pain relief, many of the patients were pretty indifferent to repeated administration. Cass would later attribute this reluctance to the hospital setting and would achieve a much greater result in future studies in which patients' comfort and emotional states were taken into account as part of the experimental setting. Perhaps the most interesting result to come out of Cast and Collins' study, however, was their observation that in addition to the pain relief, patients who had been given LSD displayed a peculiar disregard for the gravity of their situations and talked freely about their impending death, which something which they claimed was considered inappropriate in our Western civilization. So Cast and Collins' work on the use of LSD for the release of both the physical as well as the psychical distress experienced by the dying would be followed by a series of notable studies at the Sinai Hospital in Maryland. The most well-known of these studies was conducted by Walter Pahnke. Pahnke was a minister and a physician. He attended Harvard in the early 1960s, where he earned an MD and a PhD in psychiatry. Pahnke's interest in psychedelics concerned their ability to elicit mystical-type experiences akin to those brought about by religious practice. In 1967, Pahnke joined the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, where he would conduct LSD-assisted psychotherapy sessions with terminal cancer patients. He had for some time felt that, and I quote, "In our modern 20th century, birth and death are becoming more and more insulated from everyday existence. They are falling victim to modern technological efficiency and adding to the process of dehumanization rather than counteracting it." In 1967, Pahnke administered LSD to 17 patients suffering from terminal cancer in conjunction with psychotherapy. In a talk given at Harvard, in which he describes his results, he claimed that the psychedelic peak cosmic, transcendental, or mystical experience may ultimately prove to be the most valuable for the dying. It seems as if the mystical experience, Pahnke concluded, by opening the patient up to usually untapped ranges of human consciousness, can provide a sense of security that transcends even death. Once the patient is able to release all the psychic energy which he has tied to the fear of death and worry about the future, he seems to be able to live more meaningfully in the present. He can turn his attention to the things which have the most significance here and now. So during the 1960s, new ways of thinking about life, social justice, technology, and nature were undergoing major changes. New ways of understanding ourselves and our place in the world were taking root, with many people calling for a more sustainable, peaceful, and equal society. This new age of thinking was spurred by a new interest in the West in Eastern spiritual practices such as Zen Buddhism, yoga, meditation, and Hinduism as ways to increase consciousness and to foster spiritual awakening in what was seen as an increasingly lost and disenchanted new generation. This focus on consciousness and spirituality would also have a great impact on the perceived lack of awareness of the dying in hospitals, and what was increasingly regarded as the futile and excessive medicalization of the dying in the West, compared to the more spiritual practices that had been observed in Eastern traditions. At this time, Cicely Saunders, the founder of the modern palliative care movement, was speaking of the total pain of the dying, in which spiritual distress was now seen as a primary form of suffering, while Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was writing about the neglect and abuse of terminally ill patients in American hospitals, publishing several books on the subject and championing the global hospice movement. So much of the discourse and ideas to emerge from this turbulent time regarding the need to revolutionize the way we die in the West are still very relevant today and have shaped the modern vision of a more holistic and spiritual approach to dying, as well as the modern phase of palliative care. In many ways, little has changed since then when it comes to death and dying. So despite the promise, as I have just spoken about, that psychedelics could, by their ability to elicit mystical experiences, offer great potential for psychiatry and existential anxiety in the 1950s and 60s. By the beginning of the 1970s, the war on drugs and the controversies around LSD would lead to an almost complete halt in research with these substances. This occurred following their classification under Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act in 1971. As Walter Pahnke himself admitted, the sensationalist media coverage of the dangers of LSD, the controversy around Timothy Leary, and the links of psychedelics to the counterculture began to push researchers away and scare participants from taking part in the studies. Since the early 1970s and until the mid-2000s, all scientific research on these substances came to a complete stop. Since the mid-2000s, however, some light is being shed on this shadowy history, and research interest in these molecules has slowly been re-emerging, inciting what has been called a psychedelic renaissance. This new wave of interest has come with an altogether new approach to these substances, with a much stronger focus on neuroscientific studies, looking at the effect of these molecules on brain activity, behavior, and cognition. A great shift in the molecules studied has also taken place, with contemporary studies focusing largely on psilocybin, MDMA, and ketamine for the treatment of a large variety of disorders, including depression, addiction, PTSD, and OCD. One of the reasons given for this, as given by Robert Cahart Harris, a neuroscientist and head of the recently opened Center for Psychedelic Research at Imperial College London. We see him here on the left, pictured with Michael Pollan, the author of How to Change Your Mind, which has been seen as one of the primary books of the psychedelic renaissance, and was a New York Times bestseller 2 years ago. These substances, not having the tainted history of LSD, have been easier to get research exemptions for. Other than in research, the Renaissance has in the last decade also brought about a new wave of media and literary interest in the potential of psychedelics for understanding consciousness, for solving the mental health crisis, and healing our relation to nature. This has been followed by a host of new academic conferences dedicated to psychedelic science, such as Breaking Conventions, in here on the right, held in London every year. So while the renewed interest in these substances looks promising, the possession and use of psychedelics remains strictly illegal in most parts of the world, making exemptions for research very difficult to obtain and extremely costly, and are at present out of reach for most persons who might benefit from them. And even though some psychological therapies, such as dignity therapy, have been effective in recent years at treating existential anxiety, the need for better pharmacological solutions to end-of-life distress remains a pressing issue. Today, 30 to 40% of cancer patients entering hospital suffer from some form of anxiety and depression. Furthermore, those suffering from existential distress have been found to have worse outcomes, including higher healthcare utilization, worse pain, decreased quality of life, and decreased survival, as well as a greater desire to hasten death. In most countries today, existential and spiritual distress is still regarded as a type of psychological illness and commonly treated with antipsychotics, antidepressants, and benzodiazepines, which have limited efficacy and have been associated with high rates of prolapse, as well as low adherence. In a 2017 study, Canadian doctors were asked whether they would consider using continuous palliative sedation, that is the use of strong sedatives until death in increasing doses, for terminal patients suffering from existential distress alone. And 1/3 of doctors reported having done so already in the past, while 43% agreed that this would be a suitable option. The widespread use of antidepressants and sedatives to treat what is a natural and normal reaction to the distressing events of dying show the shocking disconnect between our growing understanding of dying as a process requiring emotional as well as spiritual care and the medical establishment's insistence on sedation and medicalization as a remedy to what is still regarded as the problem of dying.
Callie.
Yes.
Hi, it's Misty. Hi. I'm just watching the time here, so I'm just keeping an eye on the questions that might be coming in. I haven't had any as yet, so I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm just marking time with you. Okay?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So since 2011, several new studies rekindling the possibility of using psychedelics as consciousness enhancing rather than consciousness limiting interventions to treat end-of-life anxiety have been carried out, notably with psilocybin. Contrary to the studies carried out by Kast and Panke in the 50s and 60s, these contemporary studies are double-blinded, randomized, and placebo-controlled, as well as using multiple validated psychological tools and other metrics to examine effects and to assess safety. In 2011, for example, Charles Grobe carried out a pilot study, the first of its kind in over 30 years, using psilocybin for the reduction of anxiety in 12 subjects with advanced stage cancer. He found that psilocybin produced no adverse effects, except for a small elevation in heart rate and blood pressure, even in this frail population. And that compared to the placebo group, patients given psilocybin showed a dramatic reduction in anxiety that reached significance 1 and 3 months after treatment. In 2016, Roland Griffiths carried out the largest modern randomized study of psilocybin for depression. They studied the effects of a low dose versus a high dose of psilocybin in 51 cancer patients with life-threatening diagnoses. A high dose of psilocybin produced large decreases in clinician and self-rated measures of depressed mood and anxiety, along with increases in quality of life, meaning, and optimism.
Callie,
yeah.
we have about 1 minute left before 10:30. I just wanted to let you know. Did you want to open it out to any questions? Do you want to leave a couple minutes for that or no?
I would rather finish the presentation, okay. if that's okay.
Of course, yeah. Okay.
All right, okay, and I can take questions afterwards, of course.
Okay.
That's all right with you. Thank you. I have, I think, two slides left.
Okay.
Yeah. So to summarize, I would like to stress a few points which I would like you to take from this presentation. The first is that current pharmacological interventions for the treatment of existential distress at the end of life are at worst harmful and at best inappropriate, robbing individuals and their families of the opportunity to welcome and share this important stage in full consciousness and awareness. As I've attempted to show in this presentation, a growing consensus is being reached in research showing that the transcendental, spiritual, or mystical experience elicited by psychedelics may be one of the best tools at our disposal to confront the loss of meaning, hope, and control, which commonly accompanies the end of life. As Craig Blinderman has put it, a return to entheogens for the treatment of psychoexistential suffering may signal that medicine has come full circle to embrace the earliest known approach to healing our deepest human agonies by generating the divine within. So the use of psychedelics as therapies for patients nearing the end of life may foster a new therapeutic modality in which the dying are able to transcend their illness and connect to something larger than themselves, allowing for a less medicalized, more conscious, and more humanized end to life. So I think I had 2 minutes of Thomas just sharing his experience with you, if I can play that.
The fear of the unknown is one aspect of the whole dying process. Less troublesome for me than not being there when I'm needed. Because the cancer is already spread into the intestines and my lymph nodes and peritoneal tissues, you're automatically stage 4. All they can offer you is palliative care. In the course of looking up research on mushrooms and cancer, you come across the Johns Hopkins studies. So I looked into that a little bit more, and they were talking about people who had, stage 4 cancer, just like me. And they were looking at cure rates of 80%. So people, the exact same problems that I have, 80% were coming out of this with a spiritually meaningful solution to their anxiety and depression. How could I possibly ignore 80%? How could anybody ignore 80%? And in my investigations, I came across Therasil. Very experienced and knowledgeable people who were able to tell me a lot of the things that I had no idea about psilocybin. I knew it was psychedelic, and I knew that it was something that, I'd learned my whole life was this evil thing. And then you find out that it can actually help people who have addictions problems. It can help people who have anxiety and depression, and they've been testing it, with all kinds of traumatic things like that. We make the application to the health minister, and you get an automatic reply back just to let you know they received it, and then the wait starts. I'll be putting on a blindfold to block out distractions, and some headphones with some music while we wait for the onset of that. What happens after that, I have no idea. I'm nervous, but I'm still looking forward to it. Very much. I can feel it's like if you're wearing a belt that's too tight and you loosen it up after a big meal.
Yeah.
It's more of a release than it wouldn't be fair to say that I'm a different person, because that's not the case. I'm still me, but some of my perspectives have changed as to what is out there, with a very strong sense that this is not all there is. I don't want to put any particular religious connotations on any part of this, because no clouds with angels and stuff like that, but most certainly a continuity of consciousness to other. I have to tell you, for the moment, the feelings of anxiety are really just not there. I know the cancer's still there.
Yeah.
But doesn't feel as helpless.
What's changed so that it doesn't feel as helpless?
Whether I am, fully successful in my treatment of my cancer, I know that there isn't necessarily things that I can do about it, but it doesn't feel like as much of a helpless, hopeless thing. Having cancer feels like being dragged behind a horse. It's out of your control. Maybe this would be a little closer to riding the horse, as opposed to being dragged by it.
What an image.
We're still on the horse. We're still going places, but it's not as out of control. If other people could get even a portion of the feeling of release that I have found, I would strongly encourage them to do it.
The fear of the unknown is one aspect of.
This is, I can't tell. Can you still see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I can feel. I can feel. It's like if you're wearing a belt that's too tight and you loosen it up after a big meal.
Yeah.
It's more of a release than it wouldn't be fair to say that I'm a different person, because that's not the case. I'm still me, but some of my perspectives have changed as to what is out there, with a very strong sense that this is not all there is. I don't want to put any particular religious connotations on any part of this, because no clouds with angels and stuff like that, but most certainly a continuity of consciousness to other. I have to tell you, For the moment, the feelings of anxiety are really just not there. I know the cancer's still there, but doesn't feel as helpless.
What's changed so that it doesn't feel?
So you can watch. I think the video has been shared, so you can watch that in your own time. Just to finish, I want to say that Thomas was the first to receive psilocybin therapy legally in Canada. But since 2020, 38 other Canadians have been able to receive exemptions from the Minister of Health to use psilocybin to end their end-of-life anxiety. And I hope that in the near future, other people like Thomas will be able to benefit from it. And I hope that I can continue to do my small part for that to happen. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the time.
Oh no, it's okay, Callie. It's just there's so much here we can.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated, and I love this subject so much. So I'm really just drinking everything you're saying, and it's hard to interrupt you about things.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, thank you very much for listening.
So yeah, thank you. I know we're a little over time, but it says we go to 11. So, but I know we just have a few minutes probably. But there's a question coming through here. A couple questions. Is that okay, Callie?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I'm not sure how to pronounce this person's name, but I will try. So Svat, he's asking, some scientists suggest that people experience near-death visions because as death approaches, our body responds to it by showing joyful pictures. What do you think about this matter?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
It's also in Q&A.
Yes.
Can you see it?
Yes. Near-death visions. Yeah, this is a subject that has. I can hear myself. It's a subject that has been widely discussed in the psychedelic community, particularly with thinking about DMT and endogenous DMT production. So there are a lot of people who have. I mean, there is research coming out saying that we do, when we get close to death, release DMT naturally in our bodies, and that this can lead to feelings of to seeing visions and to feelings of joy and ecstasy just at the moment of death. It's not a research that I'm very familiar with, but yeah, this is what I can say about it.
Thank you, Callie. Thank you. And I have another question from Aubrey. Are these drugs that you're discussing patented? And I ask because if Big Pharma can generate revenue through these meds, I would think they would be inclined to advocate for these interventions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you, Aubrey. These drugs are not patented. Many of them, particularly psilocybin, are grow naturally on the earth. They grow as part of the mushroom. There has, in the last few years, have been a few companies that have attempted to patent new ways of extracting psilocybin and new drugs, new synthetic drugs such as compass pathways, but it's something that is very difficult. These drugs are illegal in many places, so having access to these molecules is extremely difficult, and most companies cannot at this point get access to them. But there has been definitely an interest by Big Pharma, mainly compass pathways, if you would like to look them up.
Thank you, Callie. Thanks very much. I don't see any other questions at the moment coming through.
Can anyone hear me? Can I be heard?
Christine?
I'm Christine Ramsey. I'm sorry, I am trying to put a question in the Q&A, so I put it in the chat instead. I'm sorry, I don't know why. It's just blocking me from asking the question. But Callie, do you know, I'm living in Regina, Saskatchewan, and down the road is the Weyburn Mental Institution. And I just wondered if you have come across an art project that was done here in around 2007 by a prof here at the university, Kathleen Irwin. And it was called the Weyburn Project, where it was site-specific and it was artists from Regina and a few from other places in Saskatchewan that mobilized the mental institution. And when in there were actors, there were visual artists who drew on the walls, and there was a thread of a performance that was very abstracted, but nurses and doctors. And the audience, we walked through the institution into the various rooms to see and hear these realizations, and it was fantastic. So it might be something you'd like to look up. And I did put a link. There's a review of the book that Kathleen wrote in which she accounts for the Weyburn Project. But I had to put it in the chat because I can't get the Q&A to work. I'm sorry. But it might be something really for you to look at her book. Yeah, I think.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Sorry, I'm not sure why it's just telling me I can ask, but then it's giving me a red code that won't take the question. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
Thank you so much. I think there's someone else, Mark, who cannot put a question either in the chat. So I think some people are having problems.
Yeah. So feel free to unmute yourself in just this next couple of minutes if there's any other questions, so you couldn't get it through the chat box. So please do that. Just hang on here. There's Mark.
Hello.
Hello. Do you have a microphone? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I think there are two separate problems which it would be impossible to tease apart in a paper of this length, but it might help you with clearing a bit of a path for future research. The two problems are there's a moral and political resistance to any drugs which break down ego boundaries. The notion of the sovereign, self-possessed individual is huge in the Western world. And of course, one of the great things about psychedelics is they soften ego boundaries, which makes them great for therapy and work on the self. That's one problem, is the moral problem. But I think perhaps more pressing, usually I'm optimistic about psychedelics, is the huge question of unresearched drug interactions, because dying people are typically taking a whole raft of drugs. And while it's undoubtedly the case that certainly psilocybin, salvia divinorum, the heavier psychedelics are incredibly safe if taken on their own. I mean, the LD50 is, and you'd have to munch kilos of these things to physically harm yourself. There's absolutely zero research on interactions between these things and things like the regular SSRI drugs that depressed people or dying people, and the opiates that dying people might be taking anyway. So I think without wanting to quash anybody's optimism on this, drug synergies are strange, very, very strange. You know, that something as simple as a herbal St. John's wort medicine, if you're taking serotonin reuptake drugs, you have some hippy-dippy St. John's wort and it just pushes you over into serotonin syndrome and can cause brain damage. So the interactions, I think, are what we've got to watch out for on this thing if we're trying to push towards the legalization and toleration of psychedelics for this sort of close-to-death therapeutic use. I just wonder if you've got any thoughts on that. I mean, so at the moment, most of our research has to be illegal, doesn't it? It has to be done under the radar. That's a tricky thing.
Well, I'll answer your questions in order, if I can. The first, when it comes to the moral and political problems to do with these substances, it's something that I think a lot of new researchers are trying to keep away from. to really not mix the scientific research with the political and social effects of these substances. And it's something that I think they're doing consciously to prevent the mistakes of the past, particularly Timothy Leary, as we saw. This mix with social problems and social issues was what led to the complete halt in serious scientific research about the potential of these substances in the 60s and 70s. So I think a lot of us are trying to keep away from this part of them. The second is the drug interactions, and I completely agree with you that it's a subject that has not been very well studied. There have been a few articles in recent years talking about the effect of psychedelics on the 5-HT2A receptor. So the 5-HT2A receptor has been linked to some cardiac issues in some people, and it's a very new research, particularly for something like microdosing, where people take very small amounts every day, and this can have an effect on your heart. So this is something that needs more research for sure. However, as you said, the toxicity is extremely low in these substances, much lower than something like aspirin or paracetamol that you would normally take. So they are very safe, but there are some dangers, as always. And when it comes to SSRIs, the danger is for something like serotonin syndrome. So when you're taking something that is pushing your serotonin receptors, and you take a psychedelic on top, of course there is a risk that you will get serotonin syndrome, which can be quite dangerous. But in all of these studies, obviously people have to stop taking antidepressants before taking part. So all of this is controlled. The drug interactions are controlled in the clinical setting.
Sorry, just to quickly finish up on that, I think one that's seen as unpopular because it is such a violent and alarming psychedelic is smokable DMT, because that literally just throws you into a different world so quickly. It's not the sort of thing you would want a dying person to test pilot for the first time, and yet the great thing about it is the body. It's got a half-life of minutes. It's in and out of the body very quickly. Whereas with psilocybin and LSD, if somebody takes it and it goes wrong, they're set for a 3 or 4 hour minimum bad trip while they're dying, which would be disastrous.
Yeah, I think a lot of these drugs are now being taken in very controlled clinical settings, with psychotherapists present, with doctors present, with nurses present. It's not something that you would take at home by yourself with an uninitiated guide. So I feel it's a very different setting that we're using now. So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's a slightly different context.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for that lovely paper.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for your question. Thank you very much, and thank you, Callie. Yeah, I know we're over time here, but I know there's one more question. And can you see it there, Callie?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So this was from Aubrey as well. I am familiar with voluntary stopping eating and drinking. I do work with patients going to Switzerland for an assisted suicide. So this is something that for sure is an option for many of them. Whether it could be relevant for this, I don't see why not. Once again, the research coming out has shown that even in this very frail population, psychedelics such as psilocybin can be very, very safe. So it could be something that could be done together, and I don't see why not.
Thank you, Callie. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would love to spend more time here with everyone, with the questions and the conversations that would arise from these. I'm sure we'll go on. So yeah, I think we're definitely at time. I just want to say, I really, really appreciate the depth of your work, Callie, and what you've offered here today for all of us. And it really is a wide open field that is quite uncharted in many ways still. And I think we have, quite a lot to do with exploring that still. Yeah, I think your work is helping lay some ground for that. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Misty.
Okay. So that's everything for us now this morning. We have more in the afternoon. I know my video is delayed, so I might look like I'm a ventriloquist right now, but I don't know what this looks like. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. And Ieva, also thank you again to you. And please, anyone who has more questions for Ieva as well, let us know, and we'll find a way to pass them on to her. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for your participation and your presence today. Okay, go well. Thank you.